On today's episode of DeRaud-Messinger Show, we're previewing and predicting Baylor versus Dylan, number 3 Texas. Longhorns fans, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. It's greatly appreciated. And check out our work at HornSports.com. As always, Dylan, it's free. It's such a rarity these days. I'm going to say that all the time. But Dylan, game info, because of course we want people to arrive at the same stadium as the game. It's going to be Saturday, September 23rd at 6:30 p.m. Central Time at McLane Stadium in Waco, Texas. Televised on ABC. It's not a noon kickoff, Dylan. Wow, look at that. And Texas is favored by 14.5 points. Now, of course, that line's probably going to move a little bit over the course of the week, but practically 2 touchdowns is what it's at right now. Dylan, scouting report. How are you feeling about the Bears' defense?
Yeah, Devon. Well, any Dave Aranda coach team, there will be definitely an emphasis on their defense. Now, if that
What?
execution actually happens that year, I know, right? If the execution actually happens this year, that's a whole other thing, and that's kind of what it feels like Baylor's been dealing with. They brought back defensive coordinator Matt Pullage, Devon, who left Baylor and joined Oregon for the 22-22 season as the co-defensive coordinator. And that was after already being at Baylor, and he was the safeties and special teams coordinator at Baylor. So he is now back for this year, and it has not been a great start for Baylor. They're 1-2. Ideally, in this scenario, they would be 2-1, but they did drop that game against Texas State, and then followed that up by also losing to Utah in a close matchup. And I bring up Texas State, Devin, because Baylor allowed 441 yards of offense to this team, and this is a historically bad football program. Um, and they were able to move the ball on them, specifically with 143 rushing yards. And then Utah was able to follow that up with rushing for 224 yards. So Baylor has now been allowing 170 rushing yards per game this year, which ranks them at 108th, right? So not great. But on the flip side, they're only allowing 163.7 yards passing, and that's 19th in the country. But thing is that because of their defense allowing teams to run all over them, or are they just that good against the pass, right? So it's still early on the season. We're still waiting to see what happens, but they did only allow 40 yards passing to Long Island. But Long Island also had 143 yards rushing on them. So the run game, as I'm trying to get at here, they have not really been able to stop, but they are pretty heavy when it comes to their seniors, especially the linebacker position. They've got senior linebacker Matt Jones from Odessa, Texas, 17 tackles and 2 pass deflections. He had 9 tackles against Utah, and that was because Utah had to run the ball a lot. I can't remember the quarterback they were starting the game with, but he was really struggling passing the ball, so they had to lean heavy on the run game. And then they've also got senior linebacker Mike Smith Jr. He had 15 tackles, including 8 tackles specifically against Utah. And then you've got senior linebacker Byron Vaughns, who had 2 sacks against Long Island and only 6 tackles total so far in the season. But he was able to get at the quarterback last week. So we'll see if that's maybe something they can get rolling defensively for Baylor. And then up front, they've got 2 big guys, right, on the defensive line with senior defensive lineman TJ Franklin, 6'5", 268. He had 1 sack against Utah and Long Island. And then senior defensive lineman Gabe Hall, Devin, who's getting notice from the NFL. He's 6'6", 287 pounds. He did not play against Long Island, but he had a sack against Utah. So this man is eating a lot of food, and he will be clogging up that
Eating trees at that rate.
offensive line for Baylor. Yeah, there's something they're feeding him out in Waco. But on the other side, with their passing game, they have a young secondary outside of senior safety Bryson Jackson, who's got 7 tackles. They've also got sophomore safety Bobby Devon, who has 12 tackles. He goes against your safeties have a lot of tackles. There's a problem
I
going
think
on.
I
And
covered Devon if he's out of DeSoto, so that's why he gets the pass on the tackle rule. But yes, and Dylan, I mean this Baylor team hasn't been too hot off the gates here,
No.
so I don't know if the theory is wrong. So yeah, go ahead, continue.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited for your offensive scouting report, so because that's definitely been the area in which Baylor has struggled. But again, the secondary is very young. A lot of their corners are about freshmen and sophomores, Devin. So there's some growing pains going on here for Baylor. it's not just that they're underperforming. They do have some younger talent back there that haven't necessarily meshed yet. But that is the scouting report defensively.
Yeah, offensively, as Dylan said, I mean, Baylor fans, I'm sorry, and no disrespect to, anything I might say. But I mean, Dylan, yet again, Baylor's still not a team to, Dylan's laughing, but Baylor's still not a team to laugh at. Are they still figuring things out? Yes. Have the past 7 games now been too pretty for Baylor? No. Of course, they had a pretty sizable losing streak before the Long Island game, Dylan. But Blake Shapen is usually the guy for Baylor and has been decent when playing the redshirt junior, or as my tired brain had wrote in my notes, not my brain itself, my hand. I'm gonna credit. Put Blake Shelton. Blake Shelton is not coming off that MCL injury. That would be Blake Shapen. But Aranda, Dylan, on Monday said that Shapen is not expected to play on Saturday unless something surprising happens. Of course, that might be coach talk, and Shapen has been secretly healthy this entire time and faked an injury for the NFL script purposes. But no, Shapen, of course, we're hoping gets better, but not expected to start. And in place of him, they got redshirt sophomore Sawyer Robertson out of the Lubbock area for you West Texas folk that are watching. He'll get an opportunity once again here. However, Robertson has not really taken advantage of the opportunity. Dylan has not been too pretty for him. He's struggling with the touchdown to interception ratio so far, passing for 1, throwing 3 interceptions with that. So definitely wants to clean that up against Texas. Texas right now, though, not the opponent to clean turnovers up with, Dylan, because they're taking advantage of those interceptions that teams are willing to throw their way. So quarterback right now, it is a shaky room. Dylan, even third stringer got a drive in against Long Island. Not something to bank on, but the strength of this Baylor Bears team has been their running game. Now, Dylan and I joked about it a little bit before. Just a lot of times, when you're talking about quarterbacks, Dylan, it's if you have too many, do you have one? Well, this isn't quarterbacks, but Baylor almost has too many running backs. Do they have one running back? That would have been Richard Reese if you asked Aranda last year. He was the Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year at running back. But now they got the Oklahoma State junior transfer, Dominic Richardson. When I was doing research, I was like, why does this name sound so familiar? It's because he was at Oklahoma State last season. And then Dawson Pendergrass, the freshman, had a good amount of touches against Long Island, and the stats were pretty for him, Dylan. However, yet again, Long Island, I'm not sure if that's just to throw off the Texas coaching staff a little bit and watch some Dawson highlights back from his days in high school, because he is a freshman. Not too much is on the film yet. But they do have a trio of running backs. Do expect Richardson and Reese to get the majority of the carries. So far, Richardson has been leading the way, but it really has varied literally by game. So that is something to watch for. And then at receiver, you got 6'3". That's where you got to start worrying, fans. Keytron Jackson Jr. and 6'2", Hal Presley. Those are the guys to watch out for. They do have decent size on the edge, and Texas is probably more so on the undersized corner route right now. Dylan, Ryan Watts has some size to him, but the rest of the guys are not particularly notable in that category. So that is something to watch out for, some of those deep bombs. And Texas has struggled with tracking some of the passes that have been on the sidelines over the shoulder. I've joked about Wyoming death by 1,000 5-yard outs. But even the little more intermediate passes, Dylan, has not been the friend of the Texas secondary. Although overall the defense has been performing very well. And then just to wrap it up, Dylan, tight end, 6'5" senior Drake Dabney has been the red zone threat. 3 touchdowns so far for the Baylor tight end this season. So watch out for him when Baylor comes knocking on the door. And then the O-line allowed 3 sacks against Texas State. And then I guess Aranda and the boys got into him because they haven't allowed any since. So something seems to be working there. But yet again, Texas State, talent-wise, I don't want to diss your school over there, but talent-wise probably doesn't line up with Texas. So that is a promising stat. Just going to have to see what Utah did wrong in the film session. But Dylan, X Factors, who are you feeling?
Yeah, for Texas, we harped on it in our last video, recapping the Wyoming game. It's going to be that inconsistency, specifically from Ewers, right? This is a Baylor team where they are going to feast off of the mistakes and better position because they do have a struggling offense. So there will be a lot on their defense to create turnovers and flip the script in a sense, and that is going to come from Ewers most likely if it does happen. And so this is going to be one of his games where he's going to have to be a lot more accurate, setting his feet, making the right reads, not throwing it into double coverage because again, this Baylor's going to be trying to win with their defense, crazy, right? I'm saying it twice just to emphasize it so much. But again, the scoring in the first half has not been on the side of Texas. They haven't been able to score over 17 in the first half. They've shown that they are a second half team throughout these first three games. So that is one of the areas that for Texas, if Ewers comes out kind of flat again, Baylor has some chances at creating some turnovers, it could go Baylor's way. And then on the other side with Baylor, it's going to be that secondary. Like I talked about, they're young, but they're going to need to force turnovers, and they're going to have to make it as hard as possible for these playmakers of Texas, especially the wide receivers, to create space because Texas really likes just getting the ball out fast, get into Worthy as quickly as possible, A.D. Mitchell, and so that they can then use their legs to get around defenders, right? So if they can make it a little bit more difficult for for Ewers, throwing into more
Worthy had a
tight
deep ball. I feel
windows,
like this is
that'll
two
work.
videos in a row, Dylan, that you said
Yeah,
this. But
I know.
Worthy did get to show off the arm against Bama a bit, so
Yeah,
I'll
that's
give you
facts.
that pass. Dylan,
But yeah,
X Factor wise, it's almost cheating here to name this group. And yet again, no disrespect, but the quarterbacks for Baylor, at some point, like I was watching Wyoming last weekend, at some point you just feel like the defense is going to let off the gas for Texas and something's going to break. It didn't break against Wyoming. Now, this weekend, you get that same feeling, but about Baylor quarterbacks. At some point, things are going to click. Will this be the weekend? Of course, if things do click for Baylor here, whole different ball game. So far this season, the quarterbacks have been the weak link, just also similar to Texas due to inconsistencies. If they can start to connect on some of the passes that they should do, and like I said, limit interceptions that Sawyer Robertson has thrown thus far, if he can stay out of the turnover column, Aranda and the Bears are going to look much better than they did entering the game. And then I also put Texas' ability to handle a road environment as a X factor. Now I know Alabama guys, you're like, well, we won at Tuscaloosa. I didn't win. You guys, you cheered them on. But Texas, of course, got it done, Dylan, in Tuscaloosa. But there's a little bit of a fire and a motor for that game also. Having lost at home the year prior to Alabama, wanting to take Alabama's spot at the table in the national championship conversation. Yet again, still early for that, which is why I'm noting that road environment. Baylor is not a trap game because the guys are ready for Big 12 play, and this is the opener. So inevitably they're open and ready for this one. But it's still a road environment that in recent years has been tricky. I don't know, something about McLane and in Waco, and also any games out in Lubbock proved to be tricky for Longhorns. They'll have a team that can score 45 week in and week out, and then they'll show up and score 10 in Baylor. So that is my concern in terms of an X factor. Both are semi-Baylor related. I'll give Texas a half point for that last one about handling the environment. But Dylan, how are you feeling now? Danger level.
yeah. I mean, this might be a little high, Devon, or in your case, you might think this is a little low, but I'm going with a five. A night game, even in our experiences, Devon, going into McLean, not ideal, especially when we're watching South Lake Carroll lose in our final
Oh.
year. So some mixed feelings here, but again, it's a tough place to play, especially with a fan base that they're ready for when the Longhorns come into town. So there's been some games where it's been really hot and you haven't seen the full McLane Stadium, but now it's a night game. Everyone's going to be there. Because let's face it, this is the big thing in Waco to go to. So there will be a lot of people there streaming.
I thought I was
And
bad.
again, Texas hasn't shown the consistency that you'd want to see, especially in the first half. So Baylor could have a chance to really stay in this going into the fourth quarter. and they could have had a win against Utah. But Utah made a change at quarterback to Nate Johnson, who can really make you pay with just how mobile he is. And they scored 2 touchdowns in under 2 minutes. And that's why Baylor's kind of, you know, staring down the chamber here, down 1-2, and the season has been going the way they wanted. So this is going to be a team that playing a little bit desperate. And this could be the biggest win on their calendar, especially with Texas's farewell tour, Devon, that you were explaining earlier. So I expect this game to get possibly a little bit ugly, but I will say why the danger level is a little lower is because I think Texas is actually really good in ugly games. Like, I think this defense is really ready for it, the way they play.
You're jinxing it.
And I've liked how Texas has played all year in the sense of just getting wins and showing what they got. So I've got this danger level at 5.
Yeah, and this might surprise you, Dylan, but I have it a little bit lower than a 5. I have it at a 4, just because Baylor is coming off that 6-game losing streak. Of course, they broke the streak against Long Island, who I didn't know had a football team prior to Saturday. Okay, I had to get it in there at some point. I knew they had a basketball team, but they also have a football team. The Sharks, unfortunately, did not pull it off at Baylor. If you're a Sharks fan, if you're just tuning in, it did not happen.
If you're watching this podcast,
if you're the 2 people that watch the Long Island football program, but I did put it. Compose yourself. I did put it at a 4. It has been lower in all the weeks other than the Alabama one. So to be fair, and 4 is much higher than I had it against Rice and Wyoming. Of course, those are non-conference opponents, but Baylor. Yet again, something about McLane and Waco and these Texas Longhorns just does not bode well. It's like oil and water. And do not be shocked if we get a close game. And Dylan, I don't want to say it, something kind of like Wyoming, but it could turn the other way instead of what happened in the fourth quarter. Of course, I'm not going that far, hence my danger level. But yet again, the equation for Baylor is quite simple. If their quarterback play is on point on Saturday, things will look well, especially if Texas's play from Quinn Ewers and the wide receivers. But yet again, right now, doing the brunt of it does go to Quinn. You got to be a little more consistent with getting the football to your guys, but the receivers, when he hits you with the pass in the hands, you also got to catch the ball. Go figure. But if both of those things happen, the inconsistency for Texas offensively, and Baylor just seeing some, improved play from the quarterback position, this will be a pretty good game, and we'll have to come and revisit that danger level. So that's what I have danger level-wise. Dylan, predictions, what are you feeling?
Yeah, like I said, I think this game could get ugly. I've got Texas winning 23-13.
Okay.
Lots of field goals as the defenses kind of just have their way on each side, or offenses kind of don't take a hold of opportunities. And again, I have Texas winning this by 10 points because they've got better playmakers, right? And with Jonathan Brooks kind of coming onto the scene last week, I like where this running game is going, right? So I think there's
CJ Baxter maybe back.
Exactly. So I really like Texas in this one. They've shown that they're not the same old Longhorns, and it's time to view them as that. And this is a game that the new Texas team, I would presume, to win.
Yeah, I've gotten the score wrong in terms of low versus high against Alabama, and I'm going higher this time. Last time I went lower. I want to go Texas winning 34-20. Just Texas, I know, has the offense in them to do it, but like Dylan said earlier, they've been winning games with their defense, which is shocking because if you've been a Longhorns fan in the past 15 years, it hasn't happened many times, Dylan. But I do have Texas winning 34-20. Yet again, that's contingent on Quinn Ewers, shoring up his arm a little bit and hitting those throws that he was making against a team such as Alabama. It seems like Quinn performs better, Dylan, sometimes in those higher pressure environments than some of the more so, trap games. Of course, Baylor, I wouldn't consider quite the trap game. It is a little bit of a quicksand game, though. You're walking on your path, and then you just realize that you're in the third quarter and things aren't as planned. Dylan, I see you. You're trying to jump in here. I can see you leaning in.
I had and you know this well, Devin. Ewers, is he Eli Manning right now? Just in the way that he shows up in big games, but you'll have these off games where the team really has to rely on their defense. I don't know why. That was just a name that
He's
popped in
still
my head.
getting
That's
you
why I'm smiling.
15 fantasy points every week, which depending on
Exactly.
your fantasy quarterback is good or bad. But yeah, Dylan, 34-20 yet again. Baylor, can their quarterbacks, end up just hitting their guys and staying out of the turnover column? That's to be seen. Jonathan Brooks is on the scene. Baxter's probably back most likely this weekend. Things are boding well, and there's a lot of question marks, for both teams typically. But right now, there's a lot of question marks for Baylor. Until I see those answered, I'm going to be picking Texas with the bigger score. However, I was tempted to go low because for some reason McLane games seem to be low with Texas involved quite usually. But Dylan, more importantly than our silly conversation opinions from whatever we were laughing about a second
I'm
ago.
sorry to any Long Island fans that were watching this video.
No disrespect intended to Long Island. We love you all. The Sharks are friends in Texas. But don't forget to leave your score prediction down below. Visit us at hornsports.com. And as always, have a great rest of your day.